Okay, all right. I will call the February meeting of the Deschutes Public Library District Board to order. And this has been the meeting of technical difficulties and logistical difficulties. So welcome to everyone who has managed to make it. And thanks to everybody for understanding why I can't make it. I'm under quarantine for COVID. So I didn't want to share what I have, and hope, thankfully it's been mild and it's going away, but I didn't want to take any risks. And Cynthia's still recovering from knee replacement surgery. And so this is going to be a lot more comfortable option for her, I think. So thank you, everybody, and welcome. Oh,
wait, she just sorry.
Did people have a chance to review the minutes for the January meeting?
Yes. Yeah.
Are there any additions or corrections? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from January 2023.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second, Dan.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, are there any members of the public, either online or in person, who would like to comment on anything pertaining to the library district? Hearing no public comments, we'll move on to our executive limitations portion of our meeting, financial conditions, and, oh, excuse me, I'm totally off here. Our quarterly financials, our governance policies. And Robert.
Hello, everybody. I'm also coming to you remotely, so I can screen share a few things with you. This is the time of year when I typically report on quarterly financials for Q2 of the fiscal year, but I did want to go back and address a couple of items related to the year-end financial audit and then some of the things that flow out of that. So let me jump over to, you should be able to see my screen at this point, and it's showing a schedule of revenues, expenditures, and change in fund balance for last fiscal year in the grant funds. And I want to give a kudos to Bunny Thompson for bringing this to my attention. This was something that escaped both my notice and the accountants. As you know, this past fiscal year, we started with a new CPA, Marina and Company, but for ease of transition, we gave them a lot of the work papers and spreadsheets that the prior accountant used. And we did a thorough scrub of those work papers to make sure that they all made sense. But it looks like here we identified, or Bunny identified, and then we went and dug into the work papers. We identified a place where the prior accountant's work papers had a handwritten amount in there rather than a formula. And so you can look at this number right here, and you see the original budget for incoming state and federal grants that were anticipated last fiscal year was $37,000.
Yeah.
In this final budget column, it shows a much higher amount for both local grants as well as state and federal. The only time you would ever see a change like this, especially one this significant in the grant funds, would be a year where we had a supplemental budget related to grant funds. We didn't have that for last fiscal year. So that was definitely a place where, okay, this required additional scrutiny. We went in and looked at the work papers and discovered that both of those did not have formulas. So they didn't pass through any new information. They were hard coded. So we went back, identified any other potential places in the work papers that had any hard-coded elements, identified these two and one other in the reserve funds that didn't really impact because there was no activity in the reserve funds. But what we did do was, after we identified those changes to the work papers to make sure that they were using the appropriate formulas, we did develop a revised financial statement for last fiscal year. I've just jumped over to that, and you can see there was no supplemental budget, so these numbers remained the same, which meant that the total revenues that we budgeted remained at just shy of 60,000. Our actuals didn't change because we did earn what we earned in terms of grant award monies at around 63,000. And so in terms of overall expenditures, our actuals tracked to the revenues plus the additional fund balance that carried over. And so our variance within the final budget numbers came in exactly at where we expected it to, and we ended up ending the year on grant funds with about $125,000, $126,000 worth of carryover that we pulled into this current fiscal year. So thank you again, Bunny, for identifying that. We have since revised the financial statement, and so the new financial statement reflects the correct values in that final budget table. Do you have any questions about that for me?
No.
No, that makes sense. Thank you, Bunny.
Yeah. All right. The other thing that I wanted to address that was a function of the later timetable for completing the financial audit for last fiscal year was in November, I presented on the Q1 quarterly financial statement. But some of the back and forth that we had with the auditor that we discussed last month when the auditor presented ended up coming into the financial statement for the first quarter as well. So I've actually regenerated that report for you. It's in your board packet, and the highlighted places are the places where the changes happen. But ultimately, the reason for those changes were that through our discussion with the auditor and the CPA, we made some changes to the way that we calculate prepayments and accrued interest from investments. Neither of those ended up being material, which is why they were not material findings from the audit, but they still represented areas where we wanted to true things up so that going forward with the auditor, we're doing things in agreement with them, and so we don't continue to have these kind of minor mismatches in the way those calculations are done. Now, when I say minor, I can show you some of the changes here. The way that we did prepaids, we ended up tabulating more of last year fiscal year's expenditures. I'm sorry, of the Q1 fiscal year expenditures as prepaids. And what that means is things that extend beyond the current fiscal year into future fiscal years don't get booked in their entirety, but only the portion that impacts the current fiscal year. Everything else gets carried in a prepaid expense account that would then be applied and drawn from for future fiscal years as those charges apply. A big example of this, and probably one of the biggest items that led to this change for the Q1 financial statement, was the way that we calculate the 3-year insurance on the construction project. So we are carrying about 1.8 million of prepaid expenditures for a 3-year insurance policy. So each year, only about $600,000 of that applies and accrues to any given fiscal year. And so having that all booked as prepaid, or the portion that applies to the future fiscal years, caused a difference between what I reported back in November on the Q1 report. Similarly, with accrued interest, this was something that Brenda discussed, our auditor, when she reviewed it with you last month. But there were some items in terms of the way that book value on the on the bonds that are bond investments of the construction money are to be booked. And so that changed a small delta on that accrued interest entry that I have highlighted. The main upshot to this is that it made some adjustments to what we were counting as far as our modified accrued balance in the general fund and the capital projects fund. And so those revisions essentially resulted in an increase of 1.6 million to the modified accrual fund balances, largely due to those big prepaids associated with multi-year coverage of the construction project and for some of the bond investment accrued interest entries. And you can see that in the highlights as well. In the general fund, really, this was an increase of just about $41,000 to the general fund balance. So in terms of a $10 million general fund balance, that's less than, was that 0.4%? 0.4%. So in terms of overall impact to the general fund balance, we were off by about 40,000 out of the 10 million. One area that we noticed this in was the rent. So rent, we were carrying the October rent in the following quarter, and we changed it now so that we paid that rent in the end of September, and so it's showing up now as a slight increase there. Capital and contingency, this changed to a slight amount as well. And then the vast majority of this 1.6 million is related to the items that are already discussed about the insurance policy and the way that we calculate realized interest on investments. So that's Q1. Any questions about those adjustments?
I don't think so.
All right, so now the second quarter's financial statement. So this is the one that I'll go into greater depth because this is the one we haven't covered yet. This is the quarter ending December 31st. So it's first 6 months of the fiscal year. And this is always a good place for us to do a temperature check in terms of how things are progressing against our plan for the fiscal year, how things are tracking, any unanticipated pluses or minuses there. But first, we always start with the modified cash accrual accounting of our account of our various cash accounts. So what we're looking at here is our commercial checking account. So that's our account with First Interstate Bank. The merchant checking account, which is how we process fees from various customer uses, such as the printers and lost book fees and things like that. The petty cash funds, those are basically the cash in the drawers at the various branches, and that's why that one stays roughly stable, because we like to maintain a stable amount of cash in the drawers from any given month to month. This next one, letter D, is our local government investment pool for the general operating fund. And then after that is the bulk of the cash that we hold in various treasury notes and other stable investments for the capital projects. And then the bond proceeds, that is the rest of that balance that we keep in the LGIP account for a much more liquid access to the day-to-day operating expenses of the capital projects. And then finally, the LGIP account that we opened up last year in order to maintain or gather up the tax assessment related to the bond debt servicing, and use that money to pay every 6 months against interest, and then every year against principal. So that left us with a total cash balance at the end of December of $241,607,648. And then below this line are the other accounts that we use in our cash reconciliation for this modified accrual. So these are the things that As a public institution that maintains a modified accrual accounting, these are the that we count as cash, but represent things that are not dollar bills that we can draw upon, but rather part of that accrued accounting. So things like any anticipated incoming grant monies or other accounts receivables, things like we see fluctuations here when we do our annual accounts receivable accounting for things like the interlibrary agreement that we have with Crook and Jefferson counties, the agreement that we have with the county, with Deschutes County for the law library and things like that. So we see that go up and down based on where we are in the year. Employee advances and loans, prepaid expenses, as we discussed before. So we saw a small increase here in prepaid expenses from what I reported in that revised Q1 to Q2. Accounts payable, we see that fluctuate, and at any given point, you can see that number is very high for this report, but that's just because when we snap the line and say, yep, this report ends on the 31st of December, it really depends on how that falls in our weekly review of accounts payables with the board members for issuance of checks. So this one just happened to occur somewhere in the middle of the process where we had a bunch of expenses that had all kind of gathered up into the accounts payable account. And then if you run this report a few days later, you see that AP kind of clears out at that point because the checks have been issued. Accrued interest, so that one fluctuates as well based on where we are in terms of our bond investments, in terms of other anticipated incoming interest on our various cash accounts. Accrued liabilities, payroll liabilities. So those again, accrued liabilities tend to be stable. Those are the things that clear on more of a fiscal year basis. Payroll liabilities fluctuate with the monthly payroll timing as well. So that one you can see on any given report kind of goes up and down. And then property taxes and net receivables, those are the anticipated taxes coming inbound that we don't have yet in hand, but that we're anticipating coming in. So that resulted in a modified accrual basis of about $500,000, leaving us with a total balance of $242,180,000. And as a reminder, the Q2 report is usually when we see the highest balance on this balance sheet or this cash reconciliation report, because it's right after the large tax assessment that occurs in November. So that's when the bulk of our cash inflow happens in November, and then into December as well. And so we see our total cash holdings at their kind of high water mark for the fiscal year in this Q2 report. And then in these columns here, you can see how that distributes across the various funds. But the ones that we would see the most movement and fluctuation would be in the general fund and the bond capital fund, both of which, if you did that comparison between the Q1 versus Q2, we saw those numbers in the general fund increase because that's additional tax money coming in for that. Debt service fund, that one increased as well because, again, that's when the tax assessment starts flowing in. So that's a cash reconciliation report. Any questions about any of the numbers or details there before I move on to the overview of the various funds? Okay, so let's do the financial highlights. As I said before, this is halfway through the year, so not everything expenses on a regular basis, but many things do. And so 50% is a good benchmark for us to just compare against our budget to actuals. And then if we see any deviations from that, it becomes a chance for us to take a deeper look and just make sure that we can justify and explain them. And typically we can. So this is the point in the highlights where I bring those to your attention to say, yeah, these didn't match up to 50%, but we know why. So as far as resources, as I mentioned, we're 99% resourced, mainly because of a higher fund balance to start the fiscal year, and that once we get through November into December, we've collected about 90 to 95% of the anticipated tax assessment for the entire year. And then the other contributing factor here, as I mentioned last quarter, is that we're continuing to see higher than anticipated interest on all of our bank accounts. That's First Interstate, that's LGIP, that's the Treasury note investments, as well as those mature and then we reinvest them. So in all of those cases, we're seeing just an anticipated or a higher than anticipated interest, and that's contributing to our revenue and resourcing. Just a note to say that by this point in the year, we also are fully funded on our contracts with Jefferson and Crook County, as well as the MOU that we have with the county for the law library. So in the general fund, we're running at 44% of budgeted expenditures for the year. So that's a good, healthy place to be. That means that we're running below anticipated budget, but remember that the budget always includes a certain amount of unanticipated expenditures. So 44% is tracking in a healthy way against what we anticipated. Personal services, benefits. So this is all of our staff wages and benefits and things associated with how we staff the library, running at 47% of budget. Again, that's good to be close, but underrunning, so that we have a little bit of margin there for some unanticipated things toward the end of the year, but otherwise things tracking well to what we had budgeted there. Materials and services running at 43%. And there's a couple areas where it runs a little bit higher than 50%, but all of those made sense once we took a closer look at them. First one is in the audit category. So if you look at the following page, or I guess 2 pages down in the physical report, if you have this with you, you can see those actual numbers. But this category is anticipated to run higher than 50% by this point in the year, because all of the audit expenditures typically are showing up at this point. So we conducted the audit over the course of 3 to 4 months. And so we're still anticipating maybe one more billing cycle that will show up against the audit. But in general, we've seen pretty much everything we're going to see for audit expenditures for the year until we get to May and June, where we'll see the last tail bit of it for some anticipated expenditures for this fiscal year's audit before we close out the fiscal year. Legal services, that's running higher than was originally budgeted, but there were more legal consultations in the early part of the year related to several of the various procurements that we've been looking at. There was the one that IT had talked you through a few months back, and there were a couple others as well where it helped to have the local government law group take an extra look at things, so that we made sure that our agreements were all in order. Rent expense runs higher than the anticipated each quarter, and that's basically because we pay those rent expenditures in advance of the start of the month. So you always get like one extra month's worth of that. This is actually 7 months worth of rent in the 6 months in this report, because we're paying the January rent before the end of December. As far as expenditures that ran less than 50%, none of those are of a major concern. So education and travel is one of those where we knew when we put together the budget this year that there was going to be a certain amount of education and travel associated with the Oregon Library Association being held in Central Oregon. And so a lot of folks in the library are going to participate in Q3 of this year. And so we're underrunning it as of Q2 because of those anticipated future travels for Q3 and Q4. Election expense, that's sitting at 0 right now, but that's to be expected because those expenses really don't start showing up in our financials until Q3, Q4. And then the other ones are just variable based on our needs. So non-employee labor, things like temporary labor, we didn't really have much of a need there. Printing, this is one where our printing expenses for the last couple of years have been running lower than anticipated. And it really represents a conscious shift in CR into other ways of reaching the public with information. So it's not that we're not printing, but we're probably not printing in the volume that we did pre-pandemic. And then the other ones, as I say, kind of vary from quarter to quarter based on what's going on. So no major concerns with underruns in those areas. And then as far as our capital expenditures, the big drivers here are the purchase of the facilities truck and planned purchases of IT equipment. So that's tracking well, and a big chunk of capital contingency is that contingency. So we would hope to never see things running close to 50% this point in the year for capital contingency, unless it was again a situation where we were making lots of big purchases at the first part of the year, and that's just not the case for this fiscal year. So that's the general fund. The next one is the reserve fund, and this one, the main thing I want to mention here is that following the October board meeting, where the board approved plans to move forward with development of Stevens Ranch and the purchase of the property, that was the point where we took that as our point to take Roble Lane out of the category of the bond capital projects, and move that money, or rather transfer the use of that property from part of the bond project to land the library owns and purchased with reserve funds. And so we transferred Roble Lane from the capital projects fund to the reserve fund as of October 12th, which was the date of the board meeting. And you can see that there, that shows up on that expenses line. But that was anticipated, it was built into the budget that the board approved for fiscal year 22-23. And it hit kind of exactly where we expected it to. In terms of the mobile library project, that's also in the budget for this current fiscal year, it is going to be highly dependent on when the vehicles that we've purchased arrive. So we did make those purchases based on the approved budget for this fiscal year, but if they don't arrive until next fiscal year, we'll carry over that expenditure as a budget line item for next fiscal year. And so you would anticipate seeing that in the upcoming budget that we'll be reviewing in a couple of months. I'm going to skip grant funds for a second because I want to tie that whole discussion, reserve fund and capital projects fund. So here in the capital projects fund, you see again that transfer of the money of the way we accounted for the purchase of the land. It came out of the capital projects fund and moved into the reserve fund. So that shows up as a higher than anticipated resourcing budget to actual. So we were resourced at 102% there in the capital projects fund. The expenditures in the capital projects fund are tracking below anticipated or below budget, but that's because we did and we continue to build in a certain amount of margin into the way that we budget the capital projects fund, given that there is a decent amount of variability in what we anticipate we're going to be spending money on when we put together the budget, looking forward into that fiscal year, just given where construction projects are and how they progress. So 12% of budget to actual is not an area of significant concern at this point. We're making the expenditures and purchases that we expect to as far as where we are in the project. And a big chunk of the materials and services at this point includes things like the move into the temporary locations, the rent for those locations, as well as associated costs with that, in addition to the fees and other activities associated with the design and build of new buildings and renovations of the branches. Okay, so now I'll move us back up the line to the grant funds report. So the grant funds, At this point, we're about 95% resourced, which is, again, that tracks pretty well historically to where we are this time of year in any given year. And that's because we tend to see two of our major sources of grant money showing up by the end of the second quarter. And that is the foundation grant funding, as well as the Ready to Read fund that we get from the state. So the Ready to Read either typically lands right at the end of December or the beginning of January, depending on how timely that is coming from the state. This year it did show up in December, and so it reflects a higher resourcing than 50% halfway through the year. And then the expenditures for the year are tracking pretty closely to the prior year, calendar year's Ready to Read monies, and a novel idea in terms of the kickoff event and associated costs with that. So we would expect to see novel idea continue to be a big driver in the second half of the fiscal year for grant fund expenditures. And then that leaves me with the debt service fund. So this one is the fund where resources that come in are related to the tax assessment related to bond debt servicing. And so the majority of that tax assessment shows up in November, and we're sitting at about 93% of anticipated. Plus, we do have that higher than anticipated interest revenue on this account. December 1st is when we make our interest only payment. And so we did make that payment, which is 1/3 of the planned expenditures for this fund. So again, tracking at 33% by the end of December is exactly where we expect that to be. And then we'll see the interest plus principal payment in June. So when you look at the Q3 report, we shouldn't see any movement in this fund other than a slight increase in tax receipts, but no new payments or expenditures at the end of Q3. We won't see that until the Q4 report or the annual report. Do you have any questions for me about any particulars in the fund budget to actuals?
Robert, yeah, other grants on the grants fund,
Yes.
23.5, is that all foundation?
So the grant funds that are included in the current fiscal year, and I'm going to lean on Chantal a little bit for this too, but it includes Ready to Read, that comes from the state. It includes a novel idea. It also, the foundation typically does give us a small amount dedicated toward collection development, and another small amount dedicated toward early learning and childhood development. I think that is the extent of what we have in the current fiscal year's grant anticipation.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah. And then to answer your question, Ray, in terms of the foundation's role, so typically the foundation will give us a check once a year or maybe twice a year, and the check comes with instructions as to how that money is earmarked. And so they'll let us know, of this check that you've received, this dollar amount should be dedicated toward a novel idea, this amount toward collection development, et cetera. And if anything is not identified, then that just goes into, you know, it basically, I don't think we've ever seen that happen, but we would probably reach back out to the foundation for guidance on that. But it could end up being unrestricted at that point.
Yep, go ahead.
A further breakdown you'll find on page 19 of your budget of the grants
Page 9.
of the 2022-2023 budget.
Okay,
Yeah, I'll be all over it.
Okay, any other questions for Robert? Okay, do you need a vote on these, Robert? It's
No
just-
decision, this was just
right?
informational.
Okay, that's what I assumed. Thank you very much. That was a lot to go through.
I realize that, yes. Thank you for your patience with me.
Yeah, no, it was very well explained. Okay, next up is schematic designs for Stevens Ranch. Todd, do you want to introduce this?
Yeah, this is a very exciting point for us. So we're at the end of schematic design. And I think the renderings are going to speak for themselves. So Ruth, I'll let you take it away and show us what Miller has come up with.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, okay. And can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, great. Well, I think the team has been working really hard since we last saw you. And I think it's evident in the amount of work you're going to see developed today and in the sets that we delivered to DPL and Redpoint last week. And just, the amount of collaboration within the team with KNCC. I think we're really seeing a high performing team that's operating at a really proficient technical level, which is important as the drawings take shape, but also a highly proficient creative and integrated fashion. And that's really bringing a lot of value to obviously DPL and the board, but also the buildings that are going to result from this. So I think what we're seeing is a really positive progress in the shape of the buildings we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to do kind of the first overview of where we are with Stevens Ranch, and then I will pass it along to our colleagues at Plus and Greater Than to talk in more detail about the early learning installation progress. And so I don't have too many slides, so I'll try to go through all of them concisely, and then I'll pause and unshare the screen, and we'll have time for discussion so that we can see faces without the slide up. Does that sound okay? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Oops. Hang on. I'm going to go back here. Oops. Hang on just a second. It was fast forwarding without my permission. All right, here we go again. I think what we'll start with is the site plan, which is tracking, fairly close to what all of you have seen over the coming or previous months. The site zoning is the same here at the end of schematic design, with the building running north and south on the west side, so it gets that great visibility along 27th. We still have the parking and building entries on the east side of the parcel, the sell-off area to the northeast corner. And we're gonna, I think we've worked through a lot of the accessibility issues, the grading of the site, and we're eager to start the next phase of work where we can really kind of now develop and really bring to life the landscape. I'm going to zoom in here on kind of the entry area of the building. So now we've just zoomed into that kind of southern portion closest to the roundabout. And you're seeing here the drive, aisle, and drop off labeled G on the right side of your screen. And the parking is kind of off the image. And then the letter A is showing you where the east entry to the building, kind of what we see as the most heavily trafficked entry at the start, is located. And we've already started placing really key, user experience items that we heard loud and clear are important to the public. So letter J is covered bike parking. Just to the left of J is where we have the exterior book drop, where you can walk up after hours and place your book in the return. And then you're starting to see us think through some benches and landscaping areas just below the letter A. with the development of the letter E, which is that outdoor kind of public meeting plaza. And you'll see in some of the plans, that's envisioned to be an outdoor space that can operate on its own, or it can be a direct spill out area from the two meeting rooms. We're in the next phase, we'll work through more information on how we'll provide shade for that area in the months that we need it. But we have kind of all the parts and pieces there. And then item B on the left side of the image is the west entry, where because it's quite a bit above the road grade, you'll either take a few set of stairs shown there, or there'll be long kind of path ramps that bring you, you can see from the roundabout or the trail, the multimodal trail up to that west entry. I did want to mention how while we were on the site plan portion here, we are still tracking for LEED certification. We are still tracking for a very robust photovoltaic installation on the roof of the building, with the intent that we would get to net zero. So a lot of the sustainability goals that you all have encouraged and approved us to move forward with are still tracking here, on this Stevens Ranch site. I think last time we met, we talked a little bit about this whole idea and kind of conceptual guide that the team has come up with that's really helping us shape the experiences inside the building, the appearance outside, and really kind of find ways to capture a sense of discovery and excitement and engagement that we all hope people find when they come to a library. And so this whole idea of you arrive at a base camp, you work your way through a trail or a journey and exploration, and you get to a summit where you get to kind of have some prospect and reflection and different kind of views and perspective. And so I'll try to, as we go through the development today, kind of show you where these opportunities are taking shape and how we see this as a really wonderful guide for developing the user experience. And in a nutshell, the base camp and the approach to base camp starts when you get out of your car or you get dropped off by a bus or a ride. You approach on foot or by bike, and you kind of arrive at that main arrival lobby that we'll show you today. And as you make your way through your literacy skills, your kind of development in the world, and expansion of kind of your perspective, you go through level 2, which is where our youth collection is, and then up to level 3, where you get kind of that opening of the view out over the landscape, and kind of you're kind of up above it, and it has a different environment up there for adults than we do on level 2 or level 1. So like I said, that approach happens, on your way to the building. And this is a rendering of that southeast corner. You're seeing the plaza area kind of on the right in front of that main entry canopy. You're also seeing kind of the hint of that spill out community space on the left of the image. You're starting to see the kind of the intention behind the landscaping being very of the high desert, of the kind of the need for drought tolerance and the climate that you have, and feeling very much a part of that local area. And then I'm going to scooch the image. You're also starting to see the covered bike parking here on the far right. And I think you can start to see how this will be a really engaging space as you approach the building and start to give you some views of the program inside. I'm going to move into the lobby now. This space really needs to do so many things. And that's what the design team is focusing on making work. And these are all things that we heard from the public, the staff stakeholders, DPL leadership. We need an area that right when you come in, you can kind of see all the things that are going on in the library. There are places where you can kind of get your bearings. You could get a cup of coffee. You could head into the meeting rooms. You could grab your holds and check out, or you can, put your books in the book return. And so we've started thinking about shaping that area based on those travel paths that I just described. Those blue arrows represent how we see people coming and going once they arrive at the library. And what that really starts to suggest to us is we're going to work on developing an area right there in the center that's kind of the hub of all of it when you get there. Do we spark curiosity for the new visitor, the visitor that's come 100 times? Do we have clear sight lines to the book return and the holds? Do we have clear visibility to the stair and the elevator, the meeting rooms? And how can we provide opportunities for display, for digital monitors that kind of tell you what's going on or what's new and interesting in the building, what books are being checked out at what rate, and how can we make that kind of a central point of orientation right when you arrive? And so what we've documented at the end of schematic design is this idea that we'll create some opportunity for casework, display, seating, digital technology there in the center. And, we haven't designed those pieces yet, but in many of the buildings we've done, we have worked hand in hand with our team to create things that do just that. So they encourage perching and waiting for a friend. They bring scale to a tall space. They integrate collection and technology, maybe a moment to plug in your phone, while you wait. But we also think about technology and imagery that can create kind of that really timeless excitement right when you enter the door. And this is a space that you'll be able to be in at level 1, but as you go up in the building, you'll be able to look down and then reflect back on that space once you've kind of made your way up the building. So it's just a lot of great opportunity here. These images are the start of some renderings that the team has been working on of that lobby arrival area. This is a view taken if your back was to that cafe area and you're looking toward the book return, you're looking toward kind of the lower part of the stair. You're starting to see the wood structure that's configuring the building with kind of the big elevator core right there in the center. And so we're going to come back to some views of that lobby, but I'm going to take you upstairs next. So once you've landed in the arrival area, you've made your way up to floor 2. There's a lot of great destinations that we're eager to start developing in the next coming months of work. We've got the creative hands-on spaces. We have story time. We have the early interactive spaces that Plus and Greater Than are going to talk to you about today. And we still have that really great spot to sit down and hunker down and read with a caregiver or by yourself. And we have areas for teens. And that's going to be a really great blend here on this floor of collection, of seating of many different types, of age-appropriate technology and hands-on installations, as well as space for activities, programs like author readings, story times, puppet shows, craft activities, etc. So what we've done to date is kind of create a map of that second floor and that we all feel, feels good. And then we'll start developing, how these spaces look and feel and take shape over the coming months. So this is just a layout of level 2 where we have inserted imagery of other projects into the areas that will really take some special attention to detail as we go forward. So we're excited to be able to share with you how these things take shape over the coming months when we see you again. These are just some photos, again, not of your project, but of other libraries and youth spaces that got us excited. They incorporate hands-on, color, art, collection, fun seating for one person or for, a couple. And then areas where you're starting to see the materials or the lighting or the ceiling and the art really start to make a unique environment. But some people will go right up on to level 3 and head up to what, will have the bulk of the adult collection. So this view is taken from the stair as you're heading from level 2 up to level 3. And look how you're able to look down and see that lobby. And, we haven't gotten into the materials or finishes or furniture yet, but you can see the scale of the space. You can see the wood ceiling and the structure, the daylight and volume and the relationship of the meeting rooms to that space. So there's really a lot of potential for how this comes together. Level 3, you're seeing down the middle of the floor, the same configuration for all the building infrastructure. So bathrooms, wellness rooms, elevator, stair, the enclosed program rooms, they all live in kind of the middle of the building so that we can have those services, track vertically in a really efficient, cost-effective way. And it's also great for users. They can find things because they happen in the same place on each floor. And, engagement and discovery and the sense of I found something new is not for the purview of just the youth. As adults, we like that too in our libraries. And so with the same kind of approach that we described to the second floor, the third floor will have the kind of age, appropriate adult complements to the second floor. Is there a place that really grabs me with whatever's new and hot or seasonal? There's places for hands-on creative activities and programs. There's a co-working area where I can come and, either connect with other people professionally, find a quiet place to work, and have some of that equipment there for you. We have areas that you're going to discover within the stacks that might be a quiet little seating spot or a place to perch and read something you've grabbed off the shelf. At the very far right of the image, this is kind of the north end of the building where we think we're going to get some great views out over the landscape to the northwest. And so we really see some special reading spaces there at the north end. The space on the top of your screen, the northwest, that's facing 27th, kind of out to Pilot Butte, having really comfortable seating, gracious tall windows and, tall ceiling height. And then on the bottom right, it also has those great views, but we've enclosed it with glass as a meeting room. So people can book a meeting or, other, community activities they'd like to have there. And when there isn't an activity in that space, there's glass sliders that just open up and allow users to use that space like it's the rest of the library. So we're really finding ways to use all these spaces in more than one way, which brings a lot of value to every square inch that you're building. Again, we haven't dug into the look and feel and materials of some of these destinations I just described on level 3, but you can imagine we're going to find a way to integrate that really warm wood character and color palette that's unique to the high desert and the Bend area. We're going to find furniture that's appropriate to the function, whether it's a co-working and kind of more of a professional working area or more of a comfy, hunker down and read for a couple hours. We're going to find great ways to display and engage all the wonderful collection and materials we have. So that'll be, again, things we bring to you over the coming months. I'm going to show some outside views and then we're about done and I'll unshare. This is a very early model view. It does not have the topography. It does not yet have landscape like trees and vegetation in it. So it's very unadulterated. So take it with a grain of salt. But this is what we're using to study what the structure is doing, and what we're calling the solar shingles on the west side of the building that will keep the glare and heat gain really mitigated on that west side for almost all the afternoon. And you can see at night how that wood just is illuminated and will look like this wonderful lantern from 27th as you're driving along. So we're pretty excited about how this is going to start to really be kind of a spot where you see the innovation and kind of forward thinking nature of DPL as an organization. Here are some early views. Again, we don't have shelving or finishes or the right furniture in, but you're seeing kind of the gracious height of the third floor. You're seeing the wood structure and the wood ceilings. And you can see how the solar shingles are angling your views out so that you get a really large view out to the surrounding landscape, but we're doing it in a perspective that you're not looking right into that west sun and heat. And then here again is that view of the entry plaza that we showed you, and really bringing that to life over the next few weeks. Here is a view of level 2, where we have, again, that same structure and wood ceiling. And so we'll continue to use these views so that they're a design tool for us and you to test what we're designing. Down on level 1, we didn't really talk about it, but we've really worked through the level 1 staff areas to accommodate, the functions and services we need there. And they too will have some great connection to daylight in those spaces. Here's a view of that entry lobby as if you were kind of, you had your back to the meeting rooms and you were looking toward the elevator stack, the stair up from 1 to 2. And again, you're not yet seeing the furnishing and kind of, floor finish and display shelving kind of hub that I described that we're going to start working on next. But you can see kind of the volume and the ability to see all the spaces that are up in the library. Here's kind of another, this view has been kind of adulterated more with some of the finishes, the life of the people and the collection and the daylighting through the windows and the skylight. So this is a view as if you came in from that east vestibule. And I think that's all we have for you today. Tried to give you a good overview and a tour of the building. I think the team made great progress and excited and poised to take the next step of design here in the coming months, really focused on everything we've heard about the customer experience, what staff needs, what your community needs, and integrating that in a really thoughtful way. Todd or Greg, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add, but I'll kind of open up here for the board to have some questions before I hand off to plus and greater than.
No, thank you. That was a great overview. These are to the board. Questions?
I still am interested in having the coffee shop. Is that still in there?
Well, didn't you see the?
I saw the coffee cup there, but Ruth didn't say anything about
Oh, yes, we do. We do have a space allotted for a cafe vendor. I know Red Point has started some discussions with potential partners. So we've got a spot. It's really well located in the building to provide service access and also a really prominent location for the customers that come into the building.
Good, thank you.
So Ruth, what's the height on those windows? The height on each floor?
Yeah, they are, I should look at it. We have started working with KNCC and potential partners so that those window sections are within a production size that's, not outrageous. And I want to say we have 12 feet to kind of the lower, like the first mullion ray, which is a pretty standard. If we go with fiberglass windows, that's a pretty standard height, or with aluminum curtain wall. And then there's kind of a transom overhead.
So 12-foot height.
I think about that, but one of the other things we're gonna do in the next phase is really confirm that we have the heights of our floors correctly, so they might adjust a little bit.
So I'm a little concerned with light pollution. That southeast end of town already receives a lot of light pollution from downtown Bend. Are we gonna have, how much light pollution are we gonna contribute into that southeast section? Which is seen as mostly residential and it's forest land.
Yeah. You're right. It's an absolutely important issue, especially because there's so many homes going in kind of right to the east of us. And we want to be a good neighbor. The great thing is the land use code requires us to address light pollution. So we have to have full cutoff fixtures. None of the lighting can go straight up into the environment. We have to have all of it kind of face down with what they call a cutoff shroud, so that it really is sending the light down and not out or up. And then we have a lighting designer on board who is absolutely testing foot candles of any of our site lighting, because you also can't have your site lighting spill off your property line. So those are all calculations that we have an expert do for us. And it's required for our next submittal to the city of Bend, which goes in April.
That site lighting includes interior lighting spilling out.
Yes,
doesn't
sir.
it?
Yes. Mhm. We have to account for any light that's coming, spilling onto our property, whether it's outdoor lighting or indoor lighting.
Because that was one of the problems we ran into with downtown Bend. We're gonna have parking, or actually the administration parking areas. We're gonna have lights in the parking area. And we absolutely violated, without knowing it, city ordinance, city rules.
Yeah, but yeah,
But even at that point, we had too many lights exterior.
yeah. Yeah, it's pretty well laid out in the code. And I think because we have a lighting designer on board and our electrical engineers, they're gonna find that absolutely kind of appropriate spot that addresses the light pollution, but maintains safety. And so those are that's the balance that we'll find.
And did I notice that there's a stairwell at both ends of each floor,
Yes,
with the north and the south end? And how big is the stairwell at I think the north end? I'm
Yeah.
concerned about fire. If there's a fire,
yeah. The size of the stairwell, again, is sized by code. So our team calculates the number of occupants per square foot that we'll have in any part of the building. And then there's a kind of a math equation you do to determine how many inches of clearance you need to exit the building in an emergency. And that's based on the square footage we have and the kinds of activities. So for an office building, that calculation is different than if you have a big kind of event space. That's one of the reasons you see us put the big meeting rooms on level 1, because we can get those occupants out really easily. So I know the team has really dug into the stairwells in particular.
And there's elevator at either end, or it's just central?
Well, both ends. Mhm.
if we can't use that in fire.
Yeah, I was just thinking about accessibility.
Oh, yeah, and that's a very long stairway going up to the 3rd floor. How many elevator banks are we having, and what's the capacity for them?
Yep, we have 2 elevators at the lobby and another elevator at the north end. And those are, we again work with our elevator specialists to look at travel time, travel distance, and the kind of the amount of use, so that people aren't waiting too long if they choose to use the elevator.
So we're meeting all of ADA requirements.
Absolutely.
I have to ask, because the city constantly thinks they are.
Oh, yeah. Well, and it's part of our duty as a licensed architect. That is our charge, is life safety and welfare. So we're on top of that. Any other questions? Anything I forgot to describe that you're interested in, or?
No, I think these designs are extremely exciting. I mean, this building is really kind of taking shape before our eyes, and you're really putting some care and thought into what makes Central Oregon special, and I think this building design reflects that. So I really find these designs exciting.
Oh, thanks,
Uh,
Ann.
Cynthia or Ann, did you have any questions?
Not at this time. I'm just real excited to see what's coming forward.
Okay, well, we have a vote, I believe, to approve the schematic design. So would you like us to do that now before we hear plus and greater than's presentation? Does that seem appropriate, Todd?
And for the people in the room, we have some suggested language if you want to use it.
I would entertain a motion.
Sure. I move to approve the overall site plans and major components outlined in the architect's presentation on the Stevens Ranch Library facility.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
I'm gonna vote against it because I still have a major concern about the size of the building. The design looks really nice, but I'm still concerned about the overall size.
Okay, your concern is noted, Ray. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, plus and greater than is up next.
Yeah, and I'll do a little introduction because this is the first time the board really gets to see this really talented partner that we brought on board last year. I think, I talked earlier about the high performing team that we have. We have kind of national experts working on so many facets of your buildings. And we chose all of them with really a thoughtful approach to what would bring the most value to all of the projects, the renovations, the new constructions, the remodels. And that's the same with plus and greater than. When we knew that we wanted to have areas of early learning engagement, we did kind of a whole nationwide search of people who were working in that space. There are not many. And we really wanted to make sure you were getting something that would be unique and notable and very thoughtful. And so Plus and Greater Than has done quite a bit of work with OMSI, with other kind of museums, libraries, places for young children. And so they bring a really creative, experienced approach. So you're going to see a little bit of that today. And I think we're just so excited to get to share the excitement that they have brought with them to the team with all of their work. So here's to Plus and Greater. Your turn.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Ruth. So we're going to share our screen here. Everybody see that? All right.
Great. So thanks again for that lovely intro. It was really kind, and it's been just a joy and a pleasure to work with the DPL leadership and staff and Miller Hall on this project thus far. We're going to kind of zoom out since you haven't seen anything about what we've been working on. We wanted to kind of root that in the vision of what it is we're trying to do at DPL, talk a little bit about the system that we're developing, and then go into some of the details of that system. So we'll go through the full presentation, and then we can come out, ask any questions, go back for any other detail, and have a conversation with you all, if that's okay. Great. So let's start with the vision.
So I think the first thing you should know about us is that although we work all over the country and actually all over the world, we're Oregonians. In my case, I've been an Oregonian for my entire adult life. And we really are in love with this place. And we took that as a sort of a starting place when we were beginning to think about the vision for these projects and for these spaces. This idea that we live in one of the most inspiring and beautiful places in the world. Central Oregon is, without parallel really in the world. but that library spaces also have to inspire especially young visitors to think beyond their place, beyond their time, towards different places, different futures.
So we want to think about the places where we come from, but also be really curious about what exists and what awaits us outside. So this vision is really focused on branching from the insight that best experiences for young people are really about creating a sense of familiarity, a place that feels like I belong, but gives us new perspectives, new ways of seeing, invites different opportunities for us to get curious and wonder about the world around us. We want to give special credit to DPL, both leadership and staff, for bringing a really clear objective when we were brought onto the team. And that was, we have this really incredible system and of many branches, right? And we want to make sure that we're creating equity for early learners and families across that system. We don't want to just have one fantastic place in one of the branches and the others are sort of less served. And so as we developed this, this approach, this concept, we really wanted to root that in a systemized approach that made sure that we were creating really exciting opportunities for interaction and experience across every branch, no matter the scale of development that we're working on.
So this system is made up of three sort of principal categories. At the biggest end of the scale, we're creating environments. These are our physical environments inside the library, branches big and small, that have a unique character, that provide spaces that facilitate certain kinds of learning and play experiences, and that are recognizable and unique and special to each branch that they're located in. At the next scale down, we have elements that are designed to facilitate specific learning experiences. So we're referring to these as carts, cart tops, tables, and trailheads, and we'll show you what we mean by that in a moment. But think of these as a kit of parts that in some cases are movable, in some cases are modular, in some cases can even be shared in between branches. And then at the smallest scale, we have elements that we're referring to as dividers and landforms. These are like really, really great furniture. They are specially designed to encourage kinesthetic learning, to facilitate pretend play, and to really create sort of imaginative landscapes inside these interiors that we've created.
Great. So let's start by talking about environments. So we've been focusing on three particular branches to give you views about different kinds of scales that we can imagine as we start to bring these to life. So we're going to start, each of these environments kind of gives us a focal point, right? So when someone comes into the library, this is just a rudimentary sketch. We'll look at some renderings in a moment. But when someone comes into the library, if they're 2 feet tall, or they're 5 feet tall, or any other kind of person, they have a way to connect with the place that is early learning focused, that is vibrant and pulling them into the story, and then they can start to play together.
A key intention here also that we would be remiss if we didn't mention is that we are making places that support learning experiences for young people, but also take into consideration that interactions between caretakers and young people is critical to positive learning experiences.
That's right. So let's take a peek at Lapine. So the area you see highlighted is the full extent of the early learning zone. This includes both early learners and juvenile learners. And we're going to have particular areas of focus that really bring to life these moments. So the next view we're going to look at is in this area here, right at the entrance.
Right. So here we're looking at, if you recall and are familiar with the sort of entry area at Lapine, there is a wood ceiling that sort of defines the entry sequence that is capped off by a wooden screen at its end. That's that wooden screen that you see on the right-hand side of this image.
So behind that, we have a couple different elements that you'll see in some of these renderings that come to life in different areas. We have a ceiling installation. We have some kind of environmental graphic. These are just studies right now. These are not final graphics, but it's us trying to explore what that feels like, a kind of abstracted sort of landscape and texture. And we have area rugs that kind of cordon off that area. So they really create this immersive sense of place that family members, that young kids can come into and feel like they're in a particular zone that's made for them. Other things that you're going to see in this image, and we're going to go into lots of detail on what some of these things are are carts, these little integrated interactive components that show up in lots of different places in the library. Some of them are integrated into cabinetry that hold bookshelves. Some of them are roaming and available to move throughout the library to support programming that librarians need. And some of them are smaller tops that are integrated into custom cabinetry that give us a whole host of interactive experiences that allow us to target particular age groups. So we have things for our earliest visitors who might be playing on their backs with a caregiver close by. And we have things for our 3 to 5-year-olds who are starting to learn letters and numbers and trying to put stories together. And we have some for juveniles who are taking a little bit more risk, trying new things out. So all of the interactions that you're seeing, that you'll get to see, are really rooted in research. We do a lot of precedent research to understand what is the cutting edge right now of library interaction, of education methodologies, and how do we weave those into playful, fun, curiosity building experiences for our visitors. We're going to look now at Redmond.
So we're obviously jumping up in scale. There is a variety of kinds of experiences that scale facilitates, and we'll have a look at some of that right now.
So we have a larger area here, and we have an opportunity under the stair that we'll look at as well.
So we're now looking at that first area that Tracy identified. This is the real focused and concentrated zone for early learning experiences. Again, we have the same kinds of elements at a different scale, right? We have an overhead installation here. We have an area rug that's helping to really anchor and define that space. We have those environmental graphics that are going into the back of this bookend component that you see in a number of other areas in the library as well. We're occupying it in a way that's specific to our audience. And then sort of defining the edge of this zone, we have this piece of casework that's doing a lot of different jobs. So it's obviously has integrated bookshelves. It has a number of spots to facilitate crawl through so that we're providing both visibility from both inside and outside the play zone, but also the opportunity for children to crawl around and experience it kinesthetically. We have seating integrated in multiple places. There's a seating element here and a seating element here. This is facilitating caretakers, giving them a place to take a load off while their children are playing. We also have a play structure that's integrated into the left-hand side in this image of this piece of casework. Then you're seeing in the center of the image a number of these furnishing elements that we're referring to as landforms that, again, we're going to look at in more detail in a moment. We have a number of dividers. We have areas that are devoted to pretend play and that are being served by a cart element in this case that is providing props and toys to augment that pretend play. We have an element that we and also library staff are pretty excited about at the back here, which is a kid-sized library ladder to go along with this slightly taller than normal bookshelf. Of course, we're very mindful about the safety considerations around elements like this and are working in a great deal of detail to ensure that these are both fun and encourage exploration and risk-taking, but are also safe to use. In the center of the space, you're also seeing a cart that is docked into a table that has been specifically designed to facilitate a variety of different kinds of play and learning experiences.
We'll get more into these carts in just a moment. So if we look back to the stair, this area is in the center. We have this really iconic stair that Miller Hull has been designing. And we loved the idea of creating something underneath that stair that is really a place for social gathering and community that is focused primarily on juveniles, but is intergenerational. Anyone can sit there. Why I say that it's focused on juveniles is we've designed some furniture that's really playful, that has areas that you sit and face one another. I don't know if anyone has or has been around lots of tweens and teens, but they put their bodies in all sorts of crazy positions to get comfortable to read and hang out. And so we wanted to encourage that kind of curious ways of being together. But we also recognize that this area wants to be a little bit calmer. It wants to be a little bit more quiet. And so we took the opportunity to take this big panel right under the stair, the back of the stair. You can see it here as well. and all the way up to the top here. That panel is activated in this really beautiful sandwich of media. And I don't mean a big TV of crazy media that's happening under there. What I mean is really softly moving light that's kind of undulating very slowly. That is kind of a dynamic element that will feel really in line with the stair itself. It's all placed behind this perforated metal that shrouds the entire stair, but it gives this really soft, curious light. So it's a nice thing to sit in, to read next to, but it's also kind of a pull, like a gathering point, to bring lots of different people together.
It's also going to act like a very subtle and soft and gentle beacon at the center of the library. It'll become, I think, an iconic orienting device for regular visitors to the library.
So we'll move into Stevens Ranch, right? So you just saw some of these with Ruth's presentation. We're taking these two areas and we're just going to look at some beginning explorations of how these components can transfer to Stevens Ranch itself.
And I'll add similar caveats. We, of course, just as Miller Hull is beginning to study the possibilities that this design presents, we also are just beginning to study those possibilities. So take this image with a grain of salt. There's a lot of detail here that just isn't yet resolved. But what we are exploring here is the opportunity that the big expanses of space on the second floor at Stevens Ranch provide to create really exciting variety of experience zones and also to interconnect them in ways that's really, really exciting.
So in this view, you see, again, a big sort of element at the center that has kind of some abstracted landscape qualities, places to kind of go through and to hide and explore, with still a lot of visibility for caregivers. We have more focused areas of play attached to some particular kind of cart where I can sit with my pals and make some things, engage in specific programming that the librarians have pulled together, music making carts or different things where I can investigate new emerging technologies in playful ways that are specific to my age. We have seating elements and some of these landforms that you'll see. And we're going to go through on the next couple of pages a little bit of more information about the carts themselves, what they are, how they work, and some other elements that are part of this system.
All right, so the big picture with carts and trailheads as well, as I mentioned, was that this is a family of modular elements. So we're going to look at specific examples of the kinds of learning experiences that these elements support, but it's important to note that they can move around. The carts can be moved from location to location inside the branch, and that the same is true of the trailheads. Incidentally, the trailheads, which are being represented in this rudimentary sketch here, we'll see them in more detail in a moment, are designed to be of a size and scale that allows them to also be placed directly on the standardized book shelving that is provided throughout the library, so that when it's appropriate to do that, library staff can locate them in a place of their choosing at a time of their choosing.
We'll talk about what are those things. Okay, so for carts, what we've been doing, as I mentioned before, we really focus on how we understand early childhood education and methodologies that we can get kids to engage in ways that are really productive for their learning. So when we build these carts, we have different modules that we're focusing on. These are 3 examples of literacy carts. They are focused on lots of different kinds of literacy. So this first one here, this one is all wordplay. So the idea of this way that this would work is you have images that the visitor can cycle through. They're static images that are controlled through kind of a roll bar. And when I get to an image I like this little cat, I can use these wooden rolls to find the letters to spell that word. So we'd have a series of images that kids can use to try to spell. We do have characters included to expand to the Spanish language alphabet, so we can include both English and Spanish spelling in this component. At the base of this cart, we have ways for kids to practice tracing, right? The way that we learn how to make and create letters and alphabets and form is by using our bodies, getting muscle memory. So we want to build some of those activities in. This is also a cabinet that has lots of expansive toys around alphabet blocks, literacy, letters, trying to understand and create words together.
We don't have to go into
All the
immense
detail.
amount of detail about each of these cards. Of course, there's quite a bit more detail in thinking around the specifics of them at the level of development that they're at currently. We, of course, won't go into all of that right
No,
now, but we
I'll
wanted
just-
to give you an overview
yeah.
of the experience.
So the other ones might have to do with motor skills, gross motor skills, fine motor skills, surprise and delight, object permanence, things that we know are at really important at key levels of childhood development. For some other carts, we might have them focus on performance or pretend play. So we have kitchen carts that kind of mock up a little kitchen area that I can play in that are really useful for pretend play. Funny faces. This is basically like a giant Mr. Potato Head who becomes your friend, and you can transform him or her into all different kinds of shapes and sizes. A tiny puppet theater that we can bring to life with some integrated play. And for getting our wiggles out, some kind of music elements, game elements that really get kids activated and balance the focus we need in our story time with coming out of story time and needing a group of people to be engaged and playing with their bodies and getting excited.
One of the great things about the modular nature of this system is that it allows library staff to control when and where these more active experiences are taking place. Another category of kinds of experiences are making experiences. And what you're looking at here are actually 2 examples, although I know it looks like it's 4 examples of different kinds of making carts. The left 3 images describe 3 separate faces of a single cart that is devoted to making, to collaborating to make music. Each side is devoted to a different aspect of a sequenced music experience. So one is a chordal, so we're making a chord structure. The other one is for creating melodies and hearing them played back. And the last one is for creating rhythms and hearing them played back. Each of these 3 elements of this sequenced music, which means music that is looping over and over and over again, that you can change as it's looping, are played together. So the song that's created becomes a collaborative one. And ideally, we create a way in which the visitors are able to record what they've created and share it when they're finished.
And I think, you know, developing something like this, typically when we're coming in to develop something for a library environment or early learning space, we're doing something that's built in fully, and it's the same that it is when we install it as 5-10 years later, right? What we're doing here and what DPL has asked us to do is really innovative. It's taking all of these elements, thinking about them in a modular sort of systemized format, which means we have a ton of variety that we can add to and change. So if I'm going to the same library over the course of 4 years, I'm going to see new and different things showing up and have beloved things that are there all the time. So it gives us a really nice balance of both comfort and exploration.
It's a really unique challenge and request that DPL and Miller Hull brought to us. And we're really, really excited by what the collective team have come up with in response to that. We think, you know, it's impossible to say for sure, but we haven't seen anything like this in any early learning environment, whether it's in a library or a museum really before. The sort of modularity of this system and the ability that will provide to adapt as changes in your public's needs arise, as changes in culture arise over the decades that the system will be in place.
Just a few more quick things. So trailheads that we mentioned, these also get integrated into shelving throughout the library system and into custom cabinets where available in certain branches. These are kind of 2 different flavors. One of them is essentially an integrated shelf that has a prompt. So librarians can change this prompt. One might be, can you find a book about, and they can change it to say, hungry animals. So in this case, these are meant to be prompts for curiosity. So the idea is to integrate these into early learning spaces and give kids who sometimes can get focused on one book over and over again, a way to start to explore with their caregiver or with their siblings, different books that might represent different kinds of topics. So another way that we could prompt them is, what's the silliest book that you can find, right? So maybe this is more about visual literacy, understanding how to understand what imagery and illustrations look like. The third type of diorama is, the third type of trailhead is a diorama. So these are built with really vibrant imagery. They can be pre-made, so we can have particular genre types of dioramas where there's like a lot of little scenery to look at.
We got particularly excited about the opportunity to invite Deschutes County artists to create some of these.
And then the second one is one that is essentially a scene setting that can be programmed by the public themselves. So librarians can create a program where we come in and we all make a scene, and these go into these dioramas that are then prominently featured in the library. So we really bring the community into creating content with us. And this is how those get integrated. We have some cart tops. These are focused on our earliest learners. I think I mentioned them before. These are integrated mobiles, so you can put a small child on their back and sit with them. It has a landform associated with it that has a mirror, kind of like a shoe mirror that you might see. So you can actually see different reflections of your child's face as they're sitting there. We sometimes know that we need to help parents get excited about development, especially when you have a tiny infant. It's really overwhelming. But to come to the library and see your child developing and getting all these new skills in those early months is really important.
And of course, visual and tactile development is really critical in the early stages of a person's life. And so both of these card experiences are focused on providing those kinds of very basic building blocks that ultimately are the building blocks of literacy.
Yeah. And you can see how a little bit closer view of how a cart might be integrated into a table. Again, this would be if we have a really focused activity that we want to do with a group of kids, because we don't always want to be working on our own, right? How do we create moments of collaboration to work together to solve certain problems and creative challenges?
All
and
right.
then the last of this system is our landforms and dividers. I'll let you go, Daniel.
Right. So as we mentioned, the intention of this system is to provide a versatile, adaptable landscape of furnishings that encourage all sorts of different activities, from pretend play to quiet reading to group conversation. These are designed to facilitate interactions also, as we mentioned at the beginning, specifically between caretakers and children, productive learning-oriented interactions.
So we have dividers. These are locked into place, but allow our staff to kind of shape space. If we want to do a little program over to one side and we want to make space, we can use these dividers to change them. They can also be pretend play experiences by allowing people to kind of inhabit different areas of them, as you'll see in some of the renders.
So this is just an overview of the more furnishing-oriented landform elements. There are 4 different shapes you're seeing in the sort of center here. This stack of 2 is just 2 of this shape stacked one on top of the other. Each of the shapes has a sort of different objective. This one is a bit like a log. Perhaps you can orient them in a circle as if they're logs around a campfire. They can be put in different orientations. This one becomes a little bit less stable if we turn it over on its side, and that slight bit of rock that it permits will allow children with various developmental needs that include movement to have a place to sit that allows them to keep moving, to keep wiggling. This element over on the far right here, when it's positioned the way that we see it here, it facilitates the creation of a sort of a quiet space. When it's put up on its other end, it becomes a tall horizontal surface that can be both a bench and a play surface.
And if we look at different ways that they can be used, they can also, I could crawl through this if I wanted to. So we're finding ways that these are, simple solutions, but they allow for a lot of creative play that we wouldn't necessarily anticipate that we want to anticipate with for these young audiences. And they can be ganged up into all different kinds of shapes. So that's we just ran you through a lot. So I hope that was easy enough to follow. I'll close this out so we can ask questions or hear any thoughts that you might have.
Does the board have any questions? I know we have 2 teachers on the board, so I imagine they might have some input here and some questions.
Great.
I appreciate the opportunity for different exploration and also different developmental levels, both physically and cognitively. children visiting the library. So I think you're doing a nice job of really looking at that spectrum of development. And I think the activities and the furniture and everything really is a good complement to what we are hoping our kids will explore and learn when they come to our libraries.
Yes, I agree. I really like it. I love how kinesthetic it is. There's so much motion to it, and which young children just really are drawn towards. So I think it's fantastic. I'm excited to see it in motion and the kids using it in our communities.
Great, us too.
It's really interesting. Are the forms light enough so that the kids themselves can move them? Or do the adults have to move them around? And also the carts.
Yeah, so the answer is different for those two. The carts are designed so that only an adult with the correct tool can move it. The landforms, on the other hand, are designed so that the children can move them around. Part of the next step in design is finding the right both method of construction and weighting of them so that children can move them, but they are too heavy to become missiles, right? We don't want them to be, they're rather large objects. So if they were too light, a child could pick it up and throw it. And we don't want that to be possible, but we want the children to be able to manipulate them on their own.
I appreciate that you tried to integrate the child's play or interaction with the caregiver, because kids don't get to the library by themselves. Typically, they have someone there, and it's nice to have everyone engaged.
For sure. And there's such a benefit to that kind of engagement, and for both parties, right? For the children to have moments of connection with their caregiver, but also for caregivers to be able to be involved and see what their kids are learning. Like in some cases, you don't necessarily always see that all the time because you're trying to do 100 things. So finding moments of that balance, giving a caregiver a place to sit and maybe take a couple minutes, but also re-engage in a way that feels constructive and really positive.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much research that supports how important that interaction is for the child's learning, but we also know that that caregivers create community in a large part, very often in spaces like the ones that we're going to be creating, right? And so we're really excited about that as well.
Yeah, I can just imagine kids using these and loving them and doing things with their parents and caregivers. It doesn't take a big leap of imagination to see all that happening. And I like the modularity of it because I like the ability to be able to switch between things around the space within a given library, between libraries. And then that also gives us a chance to update them as time moves on and maybe new things become apparent or new research becomes apparent. That indicates that we could do some different things. We're going to have those capabilities to continue to kind of grow this collection, which I really like that. I think it kind of future-proofs it for sure. It's some really creative, interesting concepts. I think you've done a great job.
Great.
Thank
Thank you so much.
Let's take into account either the children or the caregivers that have disabilities.
Yeah, absolutely. Super, super critical. And we're thinking about people's abilities in a variety of ways. So the sort of minimum standard of care is to ensure that we're not doing any harm, right? To make sure that everything is safe for people with a variety of abilities. But we want to go way beyond that. We want to think about the ways in which we are providing enough variety of experience that people who have different abilities in terms of sight, who have different abilities in terms of mobility, but also who have different abilities in terms of their sensitivity to stimuli, have experiences that are easy to understand, easy to find, that provide them with stimulating and interesting things to do at the library time and time again when they're coming back.
Okay. Any other further questions? Or Todd, do you have any comments that you would like to make?
No, I'm just that we're incredibly excited actually create these and start playing with them. So,
We'll test them out first.
yes.
That's what I was gonna say, can we get the president first?
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, did I say play with them? I mean to start observing.
All right, well, this is exciting. Thank you very much for showing us what you've got. I think we're ready.
All right, well, good to see all of you today virtually and not just jump right in and run through stuff. So overall project schedule is progressing really well. No changes to the schedule. So the summary table in the report and the summary schedule, little bar chart in there as well, remain the same. Activity on Lapine and Sisters and Redmond for construction work is, commenced in January and is progressing well. And so that's been a really good sign of how that's going. We're continuing to monitor the overall schedule and look at areas that if we need to make any changes or not, but so far everything's been moving right along. So kind of moving from schedule over to the budget side, there were no budget revisions this past month in January. And so the report for the most part stayed the same. You would see a sizable increase in our commitments. It went up from about 13% to just under 26%, so almost doubled, and that's on the financial report on the second page there. And that's really the posting of the construction contracts for Lapine and Sisters with Sun West Builders, and then Redmond with Kirby Nagelhout. So those were the significant changes there, but no other major changes. Relative to our budgeting activities, we have a lot of budgeting activities going on this month here in February and continuing through March, where we're doing a lot of cost estimating on Stevens Ranch. We're doing our final pricing on Redmond for the balance of that GMP with Kirby Nagelhout on both of those. And then also on the branches, the Sun River branch, we've been going through cost estimates on those designs as they've been going along. And not only construction costs, but also all of our FF&E budgets, all of our soft cost budgets. And I think I had noted that our plan is to do a full budget evaluation over these 2 months. And in April, you would see the results of that full evaluation of how everything's sitting based on all of these cost estimates and where we're at. So all of our team members, both design, DPL, and construction, are out very active in preparing and studying cost elements. So that's going on. Our cash flow, we'll update that in April following the budget. That's something I work very closely with Robert on. I know he touched base on a number of elements in his discussion earlier about relatives to the flow of funds, the investment of funds, and that's a tool that we use to help inform him at what points we need what level of funding for the project. And so we'll continue to update that and bring that forward. So that was really everything on the budget side. On our procurement side, like I mentioned, Kirby Nagelhout is out with the next big piece, and that'll come to you guys in April for the balance of the Redmond GMP. The other things, and we'll talk about, there's a number of write-ups. We have really been working on our FF&E purchasing, our shelving purchasing for Sisters and Lapine to get them going, because they are of course the most shortest runway here and most urgent items. We have spent a lot of time on our early learning fabrication and who our fabricator will be for that. So as you got to hear from Plus and Greater Than about what they're creating design wise for us, a these are all very custom pieces, and I'll walk through that and talk about that a little bit more afterwards, of the Fabricator that we would like to bring on board for that. So those are all moving forward on that side. In the insurance world, probably our largest one is the Redmond builder's risk insurance policy that will be put in place here commencing in March. And that's just a required builder's policy. We have them in place already on Lapine and Sisters, and those were very small policies, so they were within Todd's limits or authorization level for approval. Because they're renovations and of the size, they're really not a very expensive policy to put in place. So that's been going on. Our DSIP, all of our subcontractors are actively being enrolled into that program for all of our projects. And that's been going smoothly and very well, with good coverage there, within not having any issues with subs not being able to, participate and qualify in our insurance program. So that's been very positive from that standpoint. On the Stevens Ranch project, as you saw where we're at with our schematic design, that process is really, Ruth really talked about the design and the development of it and everything else. From a performance standpoint, Miller Hull has actually done an outstanding job of bringing our design along, incorporating the revisions that we talked about last month that we've done through that to get to this point. And the package that they put together for us to use in reviewing and evaluating this phase of work, in cost estimating this phase of work, both with KNCC and our third-party estimator, JLD, was very thorough, very complete. In their contract, we laid out a lot of specific deliverables that we wanted to see, and their packages have always been just absolutely spot on, really detailed, and provide us with the level of completeness of their work that we expect and thoroughness that we can really utilize those documents to get a really good sound cost estimate. As we budget the job with the conceptual documents, there's a lot of guesswork because they're very high level documents. At schematic, we finally get to really start, the contractors and estimators really start to do more detailed takeoffs, and they understand the project much in more depth and thoroughness in order to have a more accurate cost estimate. So very excited about where we're at today on that. Our cost estimating process will take us well into the mid part of March to get through. We do, besides the GC and estimator putting together their cost estimate, we spend a fair amount of time reviewing it and talking about it as a group of, is it meeting the intent? Are the assumptions accurate? What the design team is doing, is it cost effective? Can we afford everything that you see on these plans? And is it the best way? What are some other alternatives? The team is very collaborative in that manner, and it's been working really well together. And that's always something that we strive for, is a very strong team environment and team approach to this. And that'll carry through on this cost exercise. Any other elements on Stevens Ranch from a design standpoint? Said you've seen everything, you kind of know where we're at. One of the pieces Ruth talked about was our commitment to net zero and a strong level of PV. I was really happy with the way they have already at this early of a stage figure out how we're going to lay out that PV. So it doesn't become the focal point of what you see, but is highly efficient in generation of power to offset that. We've had some really good work sessions with our local utility provider, Central Electric Cooperative, and the power that we're getting for the facility. We are an all electric. We're not using any gas, in any of our facilities on the new ones. And so having that power system designed, they've been very cooperative in getting that figured out early here. We've already got that design put together through the developer. And so that's been progressing really well, and very happy with that process. So Stevens Ranch is marching right along. The Redmond Library design is done, but we're wrapping up our permitting. We've commenced all of the demolition and site preparation work. They're going to be starting grading, and we're pulling our grading permit and then a site improvement permit for our utilities. And our building permit is right behind that. All of them are tracking right along to our schedule and to what Kirby is needing for their work. And so that process has moved along quite well. As you dive into these projects and you start the demo, you start to find things, the unforeseens, the unexpected. And with LaPine Sisters, they went into there and did all of the interior demolition and looked, and it's really pleasant to know that we have found very minimal variances from the as-built to what's actually inside the walls and inside the roof structures and the ground. So it's always nice to be able to report that getting through that process and seeing what we have was what we had expected and anticipated, and we're not running into any big surprises on any of the three projects. Even with Redmond, the removals there have been progressing very well. So very happy with how that's taken place and shaping up. We talked a little bit last month about LaPine on our temporary space, where in Sisters we have the temporary trailer. It's up and running and well received and utilized. Same with the temp space in Redmond. In LaPine, Park and Recs Department was struggling to get their permit. They did at the end of January. We've been in weekly communication with Park and Recs and their contractor. They are in the very finishing stages. They got all of their rough inspections done, all their drywall hung, and they were taping it out and getting ready to start the finish work of paint and flooring and doors. And here coming up in mid-March, they expect to secure their final inspections and occupancy approval from the county to let us take possession, and we'll get that temporary library set up. So the team's already been in communication with our movers and staff to prep for that, so that as quickly as they can turn it over, we can turn it around and get it set up and ready to open to the public. So that one is coming right along. Our Sun River project, we're in plan check. Haven't gotten any comments back. They're due here at the end of the month, early March, and but our final 100% drawings are complete on that. So that's at a point where we'll go through our permit process, get our trailer complex plan worked through, in which we'll move the current temporary trailer from Sisters over to Sun River and be able to reutilize it on that site and provide temporary services as well. So that one is moving right along. It will follow the other two, Sisters and LaPine. So we have ample time to get it prepared. Nothing significant, of course, on downtown Bend at this time or East Bend. Both of those are will occur further out, pending direction on East Bend from the board. So from a monthly report standpoint, I think I've kind of hit all of the highlights. Any questions on anything? Yes, Cynthia. You're muted, Cynthia.
Thanks. Yeah, I had a couple questions. First of all, I have to admit, people in Redmond and myself, when we've driven past the demolition, it was a little hard to watch, to be perfectly honest, to watch that building come down. But now that most of it's, I think it's all down now, is that correct?
Pretty close there.
Yeah.
When I looked at it, the end of last week, there was just a little bit of the front facade.
Yeah,
But I
that's what
imagine
s-
it probably came down between the last 2 days.
Yeah, I think so, probably too. I think that's about what last I saw too. But I was wondering what was happening with the solar panels, because that was on that final section.
The solar panels, the existing ones,
Uh-huh.
everything within the building, the demolition contractor removed what they could. If they were salvaging anything, they salvaged it. What then was demolished, they, took down, hauled away. There's a certain amount that they sort that has to go to either to a recycler or to landfill. So
Okay.
I don't know the specifics of those, but I imagine that they came and went somewhere.
Okay. Okay. I was just wondering if they were reused somewhere else. And then the second question I had, so Lapine has not had temporary space at this point in time. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So there's no, the people in Lapine have not been able to check anything out. Has that been the situation?
Not from the project site. I think that, of course, Sun River would be their closest location,
Okay.
but there isn't. And I don't know, Todd, if there's anything else to add on that, but I don't think there's any other temporary service.
Let Lynn answer that.
Yeah, so Cynthia, Heidi, the supervisor in Sun River, has noticed there is an uptick in services in Sun River, and she's talked to some of the people that are not her regulars, and they are coming from Lapine. We're also seeing a little bit, that all of our Lapine people, they do travel throughout the area. So they're not just in Sun River, they're at other places as well. So they are still doing their library services. And then for those people that are not traveling and have materials that they can't return, Kathy, the Lapine supervisor, is hand calling and hand talking to all of those people. When I say hand, I mean, she's calling them, we're making lists to see whose books were due, then we give them a phone call or we send them an email and say, hey, we're renewing this for you. So we're doing a lot of individual one-on-one conversations with people that live in Lapine and those that are traveling are.
Okay, that's great. One other thing I wanted to say is I've gone to the temporary space in Redmond multiple times, and it has always been busy. There's always been people sitting at the computers and people checking out books and kids there. I've been really pleased to see how many people in Redmond are actually utilizing the space. So that's been great.
Yeah. One thing I would add is when we rented that space, that we have a large warehousing space there. And that has really worked out very well for us to store materials, collection, and have them in a place where staff can still get at them should we need something. It's not just buried in a warehouse where it's inaccessible to us. It's all under our own control, and that's turned out to be a really good decision, I believe. Any other questions or?
I don't think
Yes.
so.
Okay, then I'm going to jump into there's 5 different items that were in the board pack for authorization. And just running down through the first one. So the first one is the early learning fabricator. And so as you saw in Plus and Greater Than's presentation, these pieces are very custom, very unique to DPL, but in general. And so early on, we started a conversation with Plus and Greater Than about how do we buy this stuff? How do we build this stuff? Who does it? And it was very apparent that the unique nature of creating these ideas and these elements, right? Carts and trailheads and all this stuff also requires, well, we got to figure out how we're going to build it and make it cost effective within the budget. And so we developed an RFP back in December and went out, it was a public RFP and went out for fabricators to come on board in a design assist role to work collaborative with Plus and Greater Than and ourselves to look at these designs, these ideas, and start to say, okay, well, here's how we would make it. Here is the type of material and how we will actually assemble it, and work with us on schedule and cost. And so that was the RFP we put out. We did, it was an open RFP to anyone. Plus and Greater Than had shared 4 different names of potential vendors that we know that they got the RFP and looked at, but in the end, we had one respondent, and that was a firm called Figure Plant. And I provided a copy of all of their proposal in the summary, simply because there was one. It's a very unique purchase that we're doing in the role that they will play, and they'll come on board here and immediately start engaging with the whole team and putting together what we're going to fabricate and how we're going to do it. And so that is the request. There is to the approval, and the initial cost that we're asking you to approve today is their design assist role. As we go from each library, we will have a separate cost for the actual elements that they will fabricate. And we have a cost estimate of those different elements that we put together with Plus and Greater Than. And then our vendor will also start to put together their cost estimate of fabricate those components. And then, like I said, for each branch, we'll come back to you, because we expect they will always exceed the signing authority level of Todd. So, questions about it?
Yeah, I have a question, Greg. Now, so what we're approving today, this is the design assist only, and then we will be paying for the components in the next set of approvals.
Yes, and there will be an approval for each library as we go along. Sisters and Lapine will be grouped together because they're going concurrent.
Yeah.
But then we'll bring the others. The other component is we are approving the selection of this vendor. Because this
As
is
the
not,
fabricator.
yes, they
Okay,
will be our
that's-
fabricator. And that's because of the uniqueness of this. Is that these aren't things that we can go out and purchase from a company because they make them all the time. These are one-offs. This fabricator is local to Oregon. They're based over in the Valley. And that was something, and our evaluation team was a combination of DPL staff, Red Point staff, Miller Hall, Plus and Greater Than. And I want to say on the DPL side, it was a variety of senior management, but also some of the interactive librarians who would really be engaged with these components to make sure that we were selecting someone and bringing on that could support the initial build and fabrication of this, but also be there to support DPL in that long term. As we talked about, like with the different components over time, they may want to be updated or changed. And,
Right.
Or if something breaks, that we have a fabricator who is local here, and this is their specialty, is these custom type elements.
And you feel comfortable that with this firm, given the fact that we only got one bid?
I do, and it does happen sometimes where they're just, there's not a lot of these specialty type firms, and people's workloads today are very impactful. That was some of the reason that some of the others, they just couldn't commit to the workload because of existing contracts and their staffing availability.
Right. Any other questions for Greg?
So I take it from your response there that this was the only fabricator that had the time to do the work for us?
That was one of the components. I think it's probably, you know, it's always hard to say, Ray, why people choose to propose and don't choose to propose. We know some were capacity issues and time available. With custom elements like this, there's not as many people out there as compared to like when you're going out for some general process or furniture and things like that.
It does seem like they're really qualified. I mean, based on their proposal, they've done a lot of pretty amazing work.
Yeah, and the team met with them one-on-one to really be able to talk to them, to understand who they were, how they approach, how they'll work with us, not just with the design team, but also with DPL staff.
Okay, any other questions for Greg on this? If not, I would entertain a motion.
One more question, Greg. I didn't have a chance to look through all these qualifications. Are there references? I see one page of reference. Have any of these references, have they done work like what we are proposing?
Yes, similar work, of course, for other libraries, for other museums. You know, specifically, I know they did a lot of work over, I believe, OMSI in Portland.
Yeah, I don't see that on the references.
It may have come through in their discussion with them.
No, there is something, I'll say here.
Well, they said they work, but there's no, on the qualification references, there's 4 references given. One's a restaurant, one's a hotel. I don't know what John Community Center is. And one's a athletic facility, arena. I don't see how these are related to what we're asking to do.
Did you see the OMSI page? They definitely do have work at OMSI.
Yeah.
Would it be possible to get a reference from OMSI? I just feel more comfortable since we only have one responder. If OMSI is the closest to what we're asking them to do, would it be logical for us to ask OMSI for a reference?
Yeah, and
More comfortable?
it is possible that we reached out to them. You know, Plus and Greater Than has done a lot of work with OMSI and has worked with this fabricator in the past. They've worked with others as well. I could confirm that we have checked that conference reference. I know there was discussion amongst the evaluation team about that. And that it was something they were very comfortable with, that they had the type of experience with these types of unique products that we would be building.
I would just feel more comfortable if we had a written reference from OMSI on how well they did, what they did, any problems they had. Since this is going to be for each one of the projects, it's going to be an additional expense, so we don't know the overall expense here. I always feel uncomfortable with open-ended project. If you had something from OMSI, you could probably get that within a few days. And we'll go back to this thing in 2 weeks.
Greg, did you say that Plus and Greater Than have worked this fabricator before?
Yes, they have.
Okay, and because I guess for me, it's enough that Greater and Less Than feels comfortable with working with these people. And haven't they also done work? Didn't the people with Greater and Less Than, didn't they tell us that they had done work with OMSI as well? They had created some of the structures and.
They have, yes.
Okay.
That's been one of their large clients. And they were part of our evaluation team, Plus and Greater Than, to really talk through that. And, you know, as the evaluation team goes through that process of looking at it, and because there was only one vendor, you know, they really did try to dig deep into that vendor to say, are we comfortable recommending to the board that this vendor is capable of doing what we want and building the types of unique products that we have? And the evaluation committee came back saying, yes, we are comfortable that this is a vendor that can provide what we're looking for. And I feel that way. I wouldn't have submitted it otherwise.
I guess for me, I'm comfortable with the fact that the evaluation team, the library, the DPL all looked at it and feel very comfortable. We already have decided that we like Greater and Less Than. They've worked with these people. I'm fine with the I'm fine with the references that we already have.
Yeah, to me, the fact that Plus and Greater Than has worked with these people in the past and that work product has been satisfactory indicates, I mean, that in itself is a reference.
I agree.
That their work product is acceptable. Because if anybody is going to have an issue with design with fabrication problems, it's going to be the designers and the people that are in charge of delivering the overall product. And if anybody would be dissatisfied, it would be them, I would think.
I would agree.
Yeah.
I'd rather not delay to get it. Personally, I feel like it's a delay to have to go and get another reference. It seems to me that we have all the references that we need, and we have all the, at least for me, that's how I'm feeling about it.
Well, I would entertain a motion if anyone would care to make one, and we can proceed from there.
Okay, Ann had a comment?
Can I get a real quick question? Greg, didn't you say Plus and Greater Than gave us the name of this firm as a possibility to work with?
Yes, it was one of 4 firms that they had experience with, and then we reached out to them directly and informed them of the RFP being issued and to promote it as much as we could.
Thank you.
So what do you estimate the total budget for all of the facilities?
Yeah, the fabrication cost will be in the magnitude of about $4 million. You know, there's a total budget of roughly $5 million for the early learning elements. About $1 million of that is in soft costs, design costs, and then about $4 million, and that's spread out across all of the branches.
So the $1 million in design costs also is with was that going to plus and minus, or is that
Plus and Greater Than theirs is about 750,000, and then the design assist is about 220,000. I think it's up to 250.
Right.
And so that's where it's right at $1 million for all of the call it design costs.
And then these folks would do the fabrication for $4 million.
Yes.
I would be a little concerned in postponing too much of this. We had 4 companies to look at, only one could give us a commitment. So I would hate to lose the one we have.
If I may, probably best to call for a motion if it gets seconded, then we have the discussion. I'm just doing Robert's rules of order.
Right, right.
I'm not trying to stop the discussion.
Mhm.
Would anyone care to make a motion?
I'll move to authorize the library director signing authority up to 250,000 for early learning fabricator design assist services.
I'll second it.
Okay. All right, now discussion. Any further thoughts?
No.
All those in favor, excuse me, Ray, did you say something?
No, I said no. No more.
Okay. All right, all those in favor? Aye,
I,
opposed? Okay, motion passes.
The next one up is the Redmond Waterline IGA, and IGA is intergovernmental agreement. And City of Redmond approached us about replacing a piece of water line that's in the street in Deschutes Avenue, right in front of the library. This is a section of water line that's part of the main water system that surrounds the library there that was slated by the city to be replaced in their capital improvement program. We're actually removing that section of the street and rebuilding it because to create parking stalls and whatnot in there. And so while we have that open, they asked, would we help facilitate installing this water line? They're paying for everything. We talked to our contractor, Kirby Nagelhout, and to the subcontractor who would perform the work, which is York Brothers. And they both said they could do the work. They were interested in doing the work and that they could do it concurrent with our project. So that basically the positives out of this is we get the new water line installed. It upsizes. It's an old 4-inch line that's going to an 8-inch. And this is the system that services, that we draw service off of. So there's an indirect value to the library for that. By doing it now, it means that there won't be construction in the future, cutting open a brand new street and tearing it right up at our front door.
exactly.
So the city provided the agreement form that went to Carrie Connolly, DPL's legal counsel, who reviewed it and provided comments about the agreement. It's a pretty standard agreement between government agencies. And so I've gone through that with the city, finalized that, the pricing. The city designed it, prepared all of that. And York Brothers and Kirby put together pricing that was submitted to the city. The city approved it. The way it will work, the city will actually provide us 95% of the funding upfront upon executing this document. And then we will pay the contractor as they perform the work. And then after it's completed and all signed off, the city will then fund the final 5%, which is the retention that is held from the subcontractor. And we will then release that upon that. We talked about warranty of who warranties that work. And that work will be warranted by the subcontractor, and the warranty form that the city provided us will actually be prepared by the sub and issued to the city between them, because that was something in the agreement that we said, look, DPL does not want to be warranting this work because we're helping to facilitate this project get done in an economical manner for the city.
Right.
So approval today is for DPL for Todd to engage, execute this agreement. It's a no cost for DPL because it is fully funded by the city. Any questions?
No. I would entertain a motion on this.
I'll move to authorize the library director signing authority to execute the Redmond Waterline intergovernmental agreement with the city of Redmond.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion?
I just want to say, back in 2008 and 2009, when my brother and I had just opened our bookstore and the entire street in front of us was all torn up to replace that old water line like Greg was talking about, this is a good deal.
Yeah, and I would agree. It makes a lot of sense not to pave and then tear up and then repave. And the city of Redmond has been such an excellent partner throughout this process that I really feel good about the fact that we can help them and help ourselves with no additional cost. I think it's more efficient for the taxpayers in general, and I think it's a great idea. So, okay, I guess all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
The next one is our purchasing of RFID and AMH, or the automatic material handling systems. This is the multiple components that we buy from FE Tech, who is our DPL's current vendor. They were selected in the past through a procurement method, I believe an RFP back in the day. And within that, prior procurement was unit pricing for the components that we would be needing for the renovations and the new library. So we're at that point where we're ready to release orders for Lapine, Sisters, and Sun River. And that is to get that material coming in. And so that's the request here. I attached the estimates that we have on those pieces for each of the three. The authorization level is higher than those three estimates because of we need to finalize what our shipping costs will be. There is a shipping cost that will occur once we release the order. They can then go to their shippers and get quotes. Shipping right now, because some of these components come from overseas, shippers don't like to quote until they know when exactly the order is going to be put onto a boat, just because of what's gone on in the last couple of years in the world of shipping. So that's the current summary. Questions on that?
If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Sure, I move to authorize the library director to execute a contract amendment with FE Tech in an amount not to exceed $250,000.
Do we hear a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
The next one is the Redmond Builders Risk Insurance Policy. Brown & Brown, the DPL's broker, went out, secured quotes on that. It'll be with two carriers who are combined together, which is not uncommon for this type of insurance, and especially with wood frame buildings, they share the risk. And the summary was prepared by Brown & Brown of what's in there. The requirements of the builder's risk policy, what's included is defined in our construction contracts with our contractors. And so this is requesting authorization to approve this expenditure. It's not really a contract, but an authorization to Brown & Brown to bind and purchase the insurance policy. Any questions?
No?
This amount is for 1 year.
No, it is actually for the term of construction. So it'll, in this case, it's 17 months of coverage. And then once we're complete with construction, property insurance will roll back in and replace this policy. And Brown & Brown also manages that process with Robert.
Okay, any other questions or comments? I'd entertain a motion.
I move to authorize the library director to approve the Redmond Library Builders Risk Insurance Policy and payment of the insurance premium in an amount not to exceed $300,000.
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
All right, last one. So this is our shelving millwork procurement. And as you may recall, we approved a contract for space saver specialists for our metal shelving components of the shelving system. And that we were able to purchase through a cooperative agreement with Space Saver, and which was that method. The other components that go into the shelving system are millwork components that are attached to the metal shelving system and create custom displays in those pieces. Those pieces aren't covered under the cooperative agreement. So when they went out on when they created the cooperative agreement, they created it for just the metal portion. Some places just buy metal shelving and therefore they don't have these wood components. We looked at it and we determined that we really needed to issue this out as an RFP because we didn't feel it was at that time able to buy it in another fashion. So we did issue an RFP back in December, advertised it and went out. Space Saver specialists who, has the contract for the metal proposed on this piece with their mill worker that they work with normally to build these things, because they normally sell you a full package. They were the only one who responded to this RFP. I think this is a little bit because it's, again, unique in that it's a millworker who is not really always building, custom millwork that you would see in a business or in a home, cabinets and shelving and that kind of stuff, but unique pieces that are attached to the metal shelving components. But we did need to go through this process to make sure we were in compliance with procurement requirements. So this is for Lapine and Sisters for all of the millwork components in here. When we went through the shelving, the metal shelving in January, I think I may have mentioned we were looking at where we were at in the budget and how that was coming together for all of the components. And now that we've actually gone through everything, all of our furniture, our AMH, and all of our shelving, both the metal and the millwork components as a whole, we are right in budget for all of our FF&E purchases to date. So I was very happy of how that worked out. We had a couple of alternates that we did in the millwork shelving of some pieces that were not fixed pieces, but inserts into the shelving. But once we looked at them, DPL actually decided that they weren't a piece that they actually wanted. And so by eliminating them, it helped us maintain our budget there. So this is a request to approve this contract award and to Space Saver specialists.
Okay. Any questions?
There seems to be quite a bit of difference in cost between Lapine and Sisters, and I thought those two libraries are almost identical.
You know, there's enough of a variation in the two buildings. They're kind of reverse layouts that cause that. But and when you look at the exact quantities of material, that's where it's at. There is a bit of difference between them. Even though it seems like they are identical in this case, there's some uniqueness about both of them.
Okay, any other questions? Do I hear a motion?
I'll move to authorize the library director signing authority up to $430,000 for the Sisters and the Pine Library Shelving Millwork contract.
I'll take it.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
I believe that's everything that I had to go through with you today. Unless there's any other further questions, I'm wrapped up.
Okay, thank you, Greg. That was a lot. I think we made a lot of
Yes.
progress today. So thank you for
Yes.
your clear explanations.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone.
All right,
I'll keep hanging on.
okay. All right, next up on the agenda is fund balance policies.
This is just an annual reminder to you that we have a fund balance policy where we, the board has stated that we will keep at least 17% of our general fund carried forward at the end of the year. 17% equals 2 months worth of operating funds. No action is needed. It was something the board decided in February 2015 that we should remind ourselves every year that we have this. I also pointed out in the budget, I highlight exactly where we are on that. Each budget.
Okay, thank you. And now we're on to the budget policy. The budget calendar, excuse me.
Okay. So budget, there's a couple of things. There are 3 things as a board you're required to do every year in the budget process. The first one is you need to appoint a budget officer. Typically, that is the chief executive officer. And so for that, we would need a motion to appoint me for that, and that would meet our requirements with the Department of Revenue. The second one is to adopt a budget calendar. The actual dates you need to adopt are the ones highlighted in bold. Just setting a date for when you appoint the budget officer, when you appoint members to the budget committee, and when you will meet, which will be May 10th, and also your final adoption meeting, which will be June 7th. And then at the very end, appointing the budget committee members, no action is needed right now. We do have 2 members who have termed off. And we have asked for their, well, anyway, we have to post for those. So we'll be posting for those. I have talked to Anna Malkin as required, and she has given me the okay to post for vacancy. And I've scheduled that for the April meeting when we would actually make any appointments. Just so you know, Wayne Kovacs is going off. He will not be reapplying. Pat Minnie is scheduled to be off, and I think she is interested in reapplying. Just to give you a sense of interest level out there, and I haven't posted it yet. I'll be posting in the next few days.
Okay.
So no action is needed on that one, but we do need action on the budget officer and adopting the calendar.
Okay, what is the closing date for, or do you have a closing date in mind for applications?
I was going to go for March 31st,
Okay,
Closest date that's not a weekend,
Mhm.
not looking at my calendar.
okay, and in the past, have we done interviews on the day in which we appoint the people? If we have multiple applicants?
You can do any process you want. In the past, I think we have scheduled it the day of the board meeting.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we had adequate time to be able to select people. And I guess you can give us a sense on March 31st of how many applications you have for each spot and whether that's going to be necessary or not.
Yes,
Okay,
I will send all applicants out to the board, once I have the final.
okay, that sounds good. Does anybody else have any other input for Todd on that? If not, I would entertain a motion to appoint him as budget officer.
I move to appoint Library Director Dr. Berg as budget officer.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. And I would entertain a motion to adopt the 23-24 budget calendar.
I'll move to adopt the budget calendar as submitted.
Right? Do your second? Ray, second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Motion passes. All right. Now we have our annual calendar. Ray, Todd, do you want to introduce this?
Just highlight a couple of things in here. This incorporates all of the required monitoring reports throughout the year. One change is our offsite visits, because there are many offsites that we're not able to visit.
Right.
We may want to, we can adjust this later in the year, but we will have opportunities to be in Sisters and La Pine after September. Just depends on the board's willingness to travel that time of year. And other pieces, as always, I didn't put in a lot of educational programs because of the length of our meetings, but I'm always looking for input from the board. If there are any presentations that you would like to see, either from staff or from outside agencies, that would help inform your decision making.
I think it's always informative for us to have the county assessor.
Mm-hmm.
Good one.
Okay, any other, I would just suggest to have people think about it, and if you come up with ideas now or in the future, just let Todd know, suggested topics, or be thinking of it as we meet. And if there's an area that you feel like we need more information on, that would be great to give him a little bit of lead time so that he can line up the appropriate people.
With that in mind, I would suggest city manager, Ben, third, and possibly the mayor.
Okay.
We don't often hear from county, do we?
When we had the diversity and equity presentation from one of the staff members, I don't remember who it was, but anyway, that time I asked if there was a possibility if we as as the board could go through some kind of diversity and equity training. I think it'd be good for us to have an understanding of what the staff's going to be going through as well.
Great.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Any other ideas off the top of people's heads? Okay. All right. We're now at the portion of the meeting where we have an executive session scheduled to review the performance of the library director. And so I will call an executive session into session as pursuant to ORS 192.6602I. So
sorry, Ann, we're talking about the annual calendar.
oh, I'm sorry. Can I take that back? Yeah, I'm sorry. I forgot that we needed to vote on that.
Well, I'll move to adopt the 2023 annual calendar as submitted.
Okay. Bunny seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, let's try this again then. The Deschutes Public Library District Board will conduct an executive session to review the performance of the library director as pursuant to ORS 192.6602I.
Okay, so we will need to place non-board members in the waiting room.
Okay. Do you want me to stop the recording also?
Yes.
Todd,
I think that's me. Yeah.
Okay. I would like to end the executive session and call the regular board meeting back into order. And we are going to, we're conducting our annual monitoring of our library director, and we are going to hear some salary comparable information from Jennifer, I believe.
Hey,
Yes. Good afternoon, everybody. So before I share my screen, just a little bit of a summary of a few key points that we try to touch on each year during this time. So first off, this process that we use, or that I'll be discussing today, is outsourced. So we currently provide some input and information to HR Answers, which is an HR and compensation consulting firm connected with special districts. They've been a long-term partner. And I like to outsource this process a little bit because, number one, they have access to a lot of data I don't have access to or would have to pay a great deal for. And so that relationship allows us access to quite a bit of data. They also have on staff some great compensation specialists that answer all of my pesky questions. So today what I'm going to do is share with you some information for the executive director position. I'm going to show you two different scenarios, and then I'll show you what we provided last year. And then I believe we were asked to produce kind of the past 5 years of information. I have that for you as well. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay.
Not small.
Let's see.
You want to get closer to the screen.
Let's.
A little bit bigger. There we go.
Okay, let's see if I can, I might have to reduce it one size just so that I can read it myself here. Okay, so the first example that I want to share with you is a market review that is done you pulling information in for executive directors or heads of executives for nonprofits. And the reason that I did ask for this year is I felt like some of the other information we were pulling in for the library director really was not representative of our director's position. The descriptions were actually more based on some of the work that our operational management does, whereas this tab reflects more of the higher strategic level work that our executive director does. So what we have here is data pulled in from 3 different national sources. And I'll tell you how we make that more regionally focused in just a moment. And then if you go to the right side of the document, you'll see the minimum, midpoint, maximum. So when we do compensation studies, it's a bell curve. So your 10th percentile is your front end of your bell curve. The midpoint's right in the middle, and then your maximum is the right side of your bell curve. So you'll also notice in each of these 3 data sources, there's a section that says geo-leveled. Geo-leveling is a statistical process that's done when pulling in national data like this. The consultant will then look to see if there's any difference in, say, the cost of living based on the region that we're looking for this particular position information. And if necessary, then the information is then geo-leveled or adjusted for current market more regionally in this particular area. So not every single piece of information needs to be geo-leveled. So you'll notice down here on the third review that there's no adjustment needed. So anyway, after doing this process, this is probably the close approximation, like I said, of our executive director. Down at the bottom, we have it highlighted in yellow is the director's current wage. And so the average for this position, if you just look right above that, kind of the average is a little bit higher. And then you see to the right, the 10th percentile for this data pool is a little over 118, and the 90th percentile is 267, a little over 267,000. So based on this particular study, the director's current wage falls into that bell curve. So I'm going to go ahead and take us down to the second talking point here. Make sure. Okay, so this, we went ahead and just for the sake of comparison, looked at more library director specific data. And based on the job description summaries that are here, again, as I mentioned at the top of the conversation, the majority of these descriptions really cover more of an operational position as opposed to a senior executive management level position. Just kind of anecdotally, there are a lot of organizations where a library director may report to a higher level county official, as opposed to a standalone organization where the library director is actually the chief, executive officer of the organization. So again, moving down here just a little bit, we again have the executive director's current wage, and then we have the survey data stratified in percentile. So 10th percentile, you can see over to your right, a little over 106, and then 90th percentile at 166. And for those of you who don't live in the world of compensation, a lot of times those percentiles will, if you see an individual whose position plots higher into the percentile range, is typically indicative of somebody who's been in the position a longer period of time and or in the industry a longer period of time. Okay. So moving down, we have what we pulled for you last year. And this was the director's salary in the end of the 2021-22 fiscal year, which is also then highlighted in yellow. And then you can see that we actually last year, when we did this study, we looked at more library director specific information. And again, kind of with the benefit of hindsight, probably the executive director, CEO level position is the more comparable descriptor for this particular position, as we have both in practice and based on Todd's job description. So I'm going to stop there. I'll get to the 5-year look back on Todd's salary information in just a moment, but I wanted to pause and see if anybody had any questions.
What is this table showing?
This is the one from that we looked at last year.
Last year.
Which we had, as I remember, I was thinking back on it, and it seemed like we had a lot of problem with the comparables last time, that they weren't really comparable. So
Yeah.
I think that this new set of comparables, the descriptions of what the person does is much closer to Todd's job description.
Yes, and I would agree. And I did go back and cross-reference Todd's current job description before putting this information and recommendation in front of you.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, no, I think they're much closer to the mark.
Okay. So here's a slide that just illustrates the director's compensation over the past 5 years. And what we did was we kind of broke it down, because the director's compensation is historically comprised of base salary and a board approved bonus. So you can just see here how that's broken out since the 2018-2019 fiscal year, where we put in the cost of living adjustment. And at DPL, as you know, we don't split our COLAs up. We have one COLA for everybody, and we follow the guidelines on our represented in our collective bargaining agreement. So that was the COLA percentage that everybody received in those respective years. And then also then to the right, you'll see the board approved bonus amount. And then also, just to round it out, I put in the director's paid time off accrual hours per month.
So essentially, this is showing us that he has gotten the COLA, no pay increase, and a bonus for the last 5 years.
Well,
I mean, no additional pay increases, what I should say.
Right. This is a very structured, seniority based kind of pay increase. I know that the board approved bonus amount, does have some discretionary decision making built in, but other than that, it tracks very similarly to the rest of our compensation program.
Right. Okay. And could you tell us what the COLA for the coming year will be?
We are still kind of finalizing that information, but right now it looks like, based on the information that we put in or that was agreed to in the last contract, it's going to be over the contract maximum of 5%. So if you all recall from last year, there's a statement now in our collective bargaining agreement that says the minimum will be 3%, the maximum will be 5%. It does appear based on indicators that our cost of living adjustment will be over 5% for the region. And so that if we're painting this with the same paintbrush, then it hits the max that we've rolled out, which is 5%.
So
Okay.
everybody's at 5.
Yes.
Right.
And that, just as a reminder, contractually, that I get the cost of living increase that the staff gets.
Right.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Jennifer? On the comparables or anything? Okay. I guess we're ready to talk about compensation. And I don't know what people feel like. We have two things to decide. One is the rate of compensation for Todd. So he will be receiving this COLA automatically. Do we want any additional pay increase from that? Or do we want to go with a bonus or no bonus? And also do we want to extend his contract end date by 1 year, which has been the practice in the past, which would extend it to June 30th, 2026. I would entertain a motion if anybody would like to make a motion to just get the discussion started.
We just make a motion to start discussion.
No, you make a motion for what you think we should do about compensation. So
Yeah.
Okay.
Who's participating?
Cynthia,
Cindy still with us?
I can't tell if Cynthia's still there or not.
Cynthia is still here.
Okay.
Who else
Yes,
is
I'm
on
still here. I just had to move my position.
But it's not coming up, so I can't tell.
Okay.
Okay, there's 5 people on Zoom.
Well, you have Jennifer.
Oh, Jennifer. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
We're all here. The board.
There you are.
You look more comfortable, Cynthia.
Oh, but we're
Oh,
not.
you're on
You're mute.
Okay. So does anybody have a motion to make? Do you want me to suggest a motion?
Sure.
Well, I can make a motion.
All right.
Yeah, I will move that we extend, where we make Todd's compensation the same as it is now with the 5% COLA and no bonus. And same other benefits, time off, remain the same.
What about extending?
If we're gonna make that one motion, I would vote to extend it by a year.
Okay. And extend this contract duration to
Yeah, June of
June
20.
30th, 2026. Okay, do I have a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Okay. All right, I'll open the floor for discussion.
Well, I disagree with that. I would agree with the COLA. That seems that we've done that every year, the standard COLA increase, whatever it might be, I'm assuming 5%. I do believe that we should add a bonus based on what Todd has done. It's been a huge increase in responsibility for all these libraries and that sort of thing. So I would propose a $3,000 bonus.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. You can ask Ray if he wants to amend his motion. Or we can vote on the motion as is.
So the only difference is the bonus.
The bonus,
Right.
yeah.
I could amend that to 1,000. Or do you want to split the difference at 15?
No, I'm not gonna split differences. I do believe that Todd deserves a bonus for what all he's done this past year. It's been a huge task, so.
So you're set on 3,000.
I said 3.
Would you care to amend your motion, Ray?
In that case, I will not amend my motion.
Okay. Any further discussion?
So did Ray, I didn't hear what Ray said. Did he amend his motion?
He is not amending his motion. He doesn't want to
Oh.
amend.
I was willing to amend it to a 1,500 bonus. And Bunny was not going to accept that. So I said I would not amend mine at all.
Okay,
Did that, Cynthia? Cynthia?
Somebody
Are
better.
we- Are we voting?
well, yeah, did you hear what Ray said?
Oh, I didn't. And Owl's not picking up anything. he's
Okay,
saying.
Bunny asked him to amend the motion to include a $3,000 bonus. Ray said he would amend the motion for a $1,500 bonus, but not a $3,000 bonus. And Bunny did not agree with that, and so the motion stands the way it was, no bonus currently.
Okay, thank you.
Well,
All right.
I'll go ahead and amend my motion to a $1,500 bonus.
Okay, and do you agree to amend your second?
Yes.
Okay, so the motion as it stands is that Todd will receive the $5,000, 5% COLA, or whatever the COLA for employees ends up being. Same benefits, a $1,500 bonus, and a contract extension through June 30th, 2026.
Right.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Well,
I guess
Go ahead.
I was gonna say that I agree with Bunny. I think a $3,000 bonus is what I would prefer.
Okay. All right, let's call the question, and all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Aye, motion fails. Okay, I would entertain a different motion.
I make a motion that we increase Todd's salary by COLA amount somewhere around 5%. And add a $3,000 bonus and extend his contract 1 year.
No,
I
you're
second
not-
it.
Not increasing his salary, you're giving him the COLA.
Yes, well, that would increase his salary 5%.
Right.
So
Okay.
that's what I said.
So you're saying COLA, $3,000 bonus, 1-year contract extension to 2026.
Yes.
And
Okay,
I'm seconding.
all right. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay.
Okay, motion passes 3-2. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. We have library news up next.
Yes. All right, grab your popcorn. I'll see if I can get this to work. Give me a second, I gotta fight the technology a little more. Okay. Here it is.
Oh, the screen doesn't like you there. On your computer?
Okay. Now I gotta go back to Zoom.
Oh, yeah.
This will be painless, 5 minutes.
We have the AO award.
Dang, this board just gave up on it. Oh. Okay, here we go. All right, hope this works.
Turn on your volume.
I'll send you the link and you can go home. Yeah. Okay. That was it. That was my library news. I'll send it to you.
Good. Very nice, actually.
So it was something different than that, or?
It was it, but they couldn't hear it on
They
Zoom.
had-
Technology is not working for me. Yes. That would be our news. I'll let you go to foundation news.
Okay, the foundation has been busy. They're raising money for the 20th anniversary celebration of A Novel Idea, and have had some really great success with sponsorships. The board is really getting out there and lining up sponsors, and the response to the program has been really positive, and people are excited. So that is good.
They're gonna kick us out of this room in 20 minutes.
Oh, well, they could just wait. They can cool their heels. Yeah, I don't have a lot of news because they are meeting tonight, but so stay tuned. All right, so self-review of the meeting. Cynthia, do you want to start?
Yeah, okay. Sorry, I appreciate the fact that I was allowed to do Zoom. I'm glad I wasn't there in person. I'd be lying on the floor right now, but anyway. The meeting, we covered a lot of information. I really appreciate Robert's financial presentation, but also Greg's information. He always keeps us so well updated on what's going on with the various programs. And I also appreciated what Jennifer just shared with us about salaries for directors of libraries. So it was a good meeting.
Okay. Anne?
Good meeting, long meeting, but very productive. I really liked the presentation by, plus or greater than. Really exciting to see the materials in the workspaces that they're coming up with for the early learning spaces in our system. So that was really exciting.
I
Okay.
agree. Oh, I'll go next. I agree that it's been exciting to see all these architectural plans coming in. So I'm excited to see more. And it was a good meeting. I think everybody we've been honest with each other, and that's a good thing too. So.
Great.
Good meeting, interesting meeting. A lot of area ground being covered. I really look forward to this, the plus and greater than. I have no idea why they chose that name, but I've memorized it. I keep saying plus and minus, but yeah, it looks interesting. I'm very excited to see what they come up with. I want to play with the things. And the furniture. I have to get myself out of there. Well done.
Okay. I thought it was a good meeting. I think we raised some important points and covered some ground and accomplished the work of the board, which is to keep things moving forward and to maintain careful financial oversight over things. So I appreciated Robert's attention to detail and the financial material that he presented. And I think the designs are just absolutely inspirational and exciting. I think when the community, when library users throughout the county get the chance to look at these designs, they're really going to be excited. And I guess part of my reaction is coming off of the trip I was just on, and I was in Christchurch, New Zealand, and I sent a little bit of that information home, but I got the opportunity to see the new library in Christchurch, which was a city that was devastated about 10 years ago by a tremendous earthquake. And their new library, I mean, a lot of the downtown is still vacant parking lots because they can't rebuild fast enough. I mean, the earthquake was just catastrophic, but their new library is right in the center of town. It is a beautiful, beautiful facility. And they did so many of the things that we're doing in this new building, and well, all of our buildings, and seeing it in action and seeing people using those spaces and enjoying those spaces. I mean, that facility is just the beating heart of that community. It is the community's living room. It is the community gathering place. And it really inspired me and made me excited about what's coming for the library users of Deschutes County. I think they've got some exciting things ahead, thanks to the hard work everybody's putting in. Staff, board, consultants, architects. It's just a great effort. So that's what I've got. And I will work with Todd about getting a work session scheduled, and we'll go from there. And with that, I'll adjourn the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Yeah, so
Hopefully it's not.